Hello, this is Strategy Miscellany here with episode 3 of our Kerbal Space Program campaign. First off, I'd better warp to the sunrise here so that we can see what's going on. And then our next step is going to be to send someone up to go take a closer look at Minmus, the second and smaller moon of Kerbal. So let's take a look here. And we do have a two-seater capsule here. Let me see what else we have here in terms of science equipment, utility equipment. Okay, we don't have the individual science module yet, so it probably still makes sense to make this a one-person trip. So I'll keep using the classic command pod here. Again, I will cut back once construction is complete so that you can see what we've done. Here is the completed Min-Palo design. It weighs 113 tons. I'm going to try and actually put this in a stable orbit of Minimus rather than just do a return trajectory there and back. So that's why it weighs a bit more. You can see the bottom stage. We have all liquid fuel, 6 ungimbaled engines, 1 gimbaled, these fins that'll help us steer in atmosphere. You can see we're taking advantage of the struts we've unlocked to make it more stable. Then you've got the next stage, one gimbaled, 3 ungimbaled. And these 2 stages should basically get the thing into orbit. It should be at least very close to orbit so that the 3rd stage can both make orbit and take us all the way to Minmus, to the orbit of Minmus, and back home. It does have 3,250 meters per second of delta V on the 3rd stage. That should be plenty for that part of the trip, so long as the 2 lifting stages work out all right. It will take a little bit to take off because the thrust to weight ratio at the beginning is only 1.26, so it'll be a bit of a slow launch. Our pilot for this is Growly Kerman. You may remember she flew the very first sort of experimental vessel way back at the beginning. So we'll go to the launch pad. And here we are, put the engines on full, put the stability control on. Nice morning launch. I like that shot. The rocket silhouetted by the morning sun. And 3. Yeah, let's launch from this position. And 3, 2, 1, ignition. And excuse me just a second here. That's better. Wanted to have the sound of the rocket, but not have it quite so loud. Start to turn over towards the east. Fins, we can actually maneuver a little better in atmosphere than some lower rockets. Leaving the launch pad behind. looks like there's a layer of maybe kind of high cirrus clouds today that was passing just now. Out of the atmosphere, so the fins are mattering less. But on the other hand, we're not having as much air resistance to the steering we're trying to do. It is a little bit wobbly, but as we switch to the next stage, I think we should be good. Whoa! Whoa, whoa, whoa. Now, see, yeah, this can happen sometimes. What I'm going to do is try and just roll through it. Do not try that with a real rocket. It probably wouldn't work. But in Kerbal Space Program, you can get away with that sort of thing. Especially with a smaller rocket like the second stage of this here. Now, at this point, we're only 30 tons as opposed to something like 120 on the launch pad. You know, I'm going to turn down the sound a little bit more. Don't want it to distract too much, although it's nice to have the roaring rockets. I'd like them a little quieter. There we go, that's better. Alright, I want to make sure the apoapsis gets about 80 kilometers, so I'm tilting out the gun a little bit. See, we're having a bit of heating. We're still being in the atmosphere right now as we go this fast. I'm going to actually turn off the engines and let us coast upwards for a bit to make sure this re-entry heating doesn't become dangerous. Or not re-entry, but leaving heating, I suppose is what you'd call it. There we go. Now we're really getting out of the atmosphere. Go ahead and accelerate time a little bit. And let's have the final burn to stabilize here. Circularize. Now, I don't want this stage to quite reach orbit, because I'd rather not have it be cluttering up the orbit. And it looks like it's going to work just about perfectly. So, switch to the next stage. Just a little engine here. Perfect for space travel. You can see our thrust to weight is just 1-1, so we couldn't even lift ourselves off the ground. Now we could, because we burned a little fuel. But since we're already up in orbit, it works fine. Well, already almost in orbit. Achieving orbit. Burning this way to circularize the orbit here. You can see the periapsis coming up. Camera swings around. Alright, it's not circular, but it's a stable orbit. Let's get that trajectory to Minmus going. So here's Minmus. It's very slightly tilted from the equator, so we'll have to do a little bit of an out-of-plane burn, but not much. And from about here or so, I think should be the launching point, probably. We'll move it around if necessary. That's the nice thing about these sort of transfers here. You can see Minmus is right near where we would actually leave the sphere of influence of Kerbal itself and go interplanetary. It's out on kind of the outer edge of that region. Nope, that's not quite it. Well, the reason why I can't see it is because of that aforementioned tilt. You can see if we get into a flat plane, we're off the plane from it. But what I can do is I can add in a second maneuver out here a little bit. Because once I'm going a little slower, it's easier to change the tilt of the orbit. And I can get ourselves with kind of a two-maneuver system into a nice intersect with Minmus. Okay. Yeah, sometimes you have to kind of rotate around to figure out which dimension your problem is. And let's go up a little bit. And back a little bit. Well, or maybe forward a little bit. Yeah, that's pretty good. So basically we have two maneuvers to do. We have this first one for 1502 and the second kind of correction burn for 43. Let's skip ahead to the first maneuver. All right, I'm starting the first maneuver now. That pink circle, by the way, is telling me where the target is relative to me. That's basically if I tried to burn, or the target velocity relative vector relative to me, I think it is. No, I apologize. That is where the target is relative to me. So we start burning on the dark side here, so you can't see all that much. There's Kerbal below. It looks like there's not really any... There's some city lights. There's some habitation on the southern continent. This must be a big ocean. Eve and Jewel in the night sky. I'll go ahead and skip ahead here to the next burn. So I had to correct the maneuver node a little bit. You can see it wants me to do... well, that's odd. Let me fix this here. I think it got a little bit of an error from the time warp, was where part of that was coming from. And the other part is just that when you do a burn, you're not doing it all at once. So the maneuver node assumes you're doing the whole maneuver in sort of one spectacular, well, maneuver. And your rocket engines are not instantaneous at changing your position. So instead, it's a much more gradual process of getting the thing to connect, of getting the orbit to change. So therefore, especially if you're going quickly around a body, especially in sort of a low orbit where your curvature is changing, it can cause the burn to be off from what the maneuver node tells you it is. So that's why I'm able to correct the second maneuver node here. Alright, that's pretty good. The rest of this can be fixed upon arrival at Minmus. Technically, the node is 10 minutes away, but it's with us on sort of a long trajectory away from the planets. It won't have that much error factor, so let's go. All right, you can see we got a nice close intercept with Minmus at 245,000 meters. And I'll warp ahead. Oh, I almost forgot. I put antenna on this craft so that it can actually communicate with home, though it shouldn't really have to for anything. But once we're launching probes, we're going to have to worry a lot about the signal strength here and eventually start building interplanetary relays and things like that to make sure that our ships can actually communicate with the mothership, the home planet. So out we go. Minmus coming up behind us. I'll go to max warp briefly. If I'm going to a lot of outer planets later, I may need to download a mod that basically accelerates the time warps here. Because the fastest time warp is 100,000 times speed. And for some of these journeys that take, 40 years game time, that just isn't fast enough. Alright, we'll be entering the sphere of Minmus in 7 hours. Ignore that this shows different. And we are in the sphere of influence of Minmus. Let me see if I can see it. I should be able to see the dawn side kind of peeking out there. Yeah, there it is. There's our first look at Minmus. You can see the green is a little more understated than in the base game if you've played the base game. But when we get close, there's some parts that are brighter green, I believe. So we'll do all the science. We'll collect the science. And then let me set myself a capture burn around Minmus here. So right up here at periapsis, decelerate, and I want to be able to get close in here so that I can get that close in science. So yeah, let's go up to, about 68 kilometers above the surface. And we'll move forward and, oh, that's a nice shot. I think, let's see. Not sure if that's Kerbal or the moon. Just looking here real quick. Yeah, I think that's Kerbal. I think that is the moon, or the moon, and that is Minmus, and that is Kerbal. So here's a nice picture of the whole system as seen from our ship. That's real nice. All right, we come in. It gets closer. You can see it rotating below us now too, because we're moving at 100 times normal speed, so we can actually see that. You can see those big craters. And all right, time for the capture burn. And we'll still have something like 600 delta V to get home, which should be plenty. You can kind of tell that because Minmus is moving. I think it'll tell me how fast Minmus is moving. Yeah, 401.8 meters per second around Kerbal. So to get to a straight trajectory of just crashing straight into Kerbal from up here, it would cost me 401 meters per second if I were at the exact velocity of Minmus. Now, because I can use the orbit to kind of go backwards relative to Minmus to start, I can save a bit of that. I don't actually need to get my periapsis to negative 1,600 kilometers either. So because of those two factors, it won't actually take that much delta V to get home. So that's how I know I can afford to do this. All right. Periapsis is 62. I think what I want to do is wait until I can be over the daytime surface close up, though. So let me wait for maybe a rotation or two here. That may not be possible with this orbit. But that's okay. Let's wait until we can get a little closer in. We'll do the close-up science. Nice view here, though. The craggy little moon. As we move towards its night side. Alright, let's take a crew report. Oh, this is still high up. We'll have to wait a little bit. Disregard. Alright, you can just see the sun peeking over the corner of it there. And this should count as near Minmus. Yes. So we'll do all our science here. We'll collect it, we'll take it home. And then our next step is we're going to build a probe to actually land on the surface of the moon. So take a little break from crude spacecraft and build an automated one. And actually get to see what the surface of another body looks like out in the abyss of space. Collect all the experiments. And I think we'll get a nice view if we go kind of around the top of the planet here. Oh, that looks pretty good. Alright, so what I want to do is essentially go retrograde from the direction Minmus is orbiting. So if we kind of come around the top here and we come out here, that should pretty much work for what our purposes are here. And yeah, you can see our periapsis going down. Just fiddling with some plane changes to bring it down a little lower. And all right, we have a periapsis in the atmosphere now. So let's skip ahead to this burn here. And let's burn our 310 delta V. Right. Yeah, still in the atmosphere with our periapsis. And we've got 266 to do a little deceleration burn when we get closer. So we come back in towards Kerbal. And it looks like we might kind of come in over a pole. I think we'll end up landing over the equator, but we might have some nice views kind of coming in over the poles here first. Oh, there's a huge comet or something. Later in the game, we'll be able to send things to go investigate those. In theory, I suppose you could even have one crash on the Kerbal Space Center as you were doing a launch. Seems extremely unlikely, but it is theoretically possible for that to happen, I think. I don't think I've ever seen footage of one where it wasn't someone had edited the game to make it happen. There was a great comedy video where somebody, a YouTuber, Danny2462, I think it is, was making this video about 25 ways to sabotage a launch, and one of them was just drop an asteroid on it so the rocket's going up and looks all good, and then nope, the asteroid comes down. It was very funny. So let's see here. Start to decelerate and lower our periapsis. Looks like we'll be coming down over the night side. That's okay. A little bit upwards. Don't want to drop the periapsis too much. Around 40,000 should be good. Or 30,000, probably better. But yeah, let's keep it about in this range. Alright, so you can see we've brought our periapsis quite a bit in, so that we're not coming in at quite so extreme a speed. And it's time to look over Kerbin here, watch the sunset behind it. And as we enter atmosphere, we will detach the parts of this that are not viable in re-entry. You can see them exploding there due to the heat. And here is our capsule, our heat shield doing its job. As we come screaming in for orbital velocity, not just orbital velocity, but high orbital velocity. It does look dramatic at night, that's for sure. And the good news is this should hopefully be a gentler return trajectory for our Kerbonaut here, because we put the periapsis a little bit higher up. So instead of being slammed into the thickest part of the atmosphere and blacking out due to G-forces, she should have a gentler ride home. I mean, she is still pulling, it looks like, 4 Gs right now, so it's not nothing. And we are running out of a blader. Well, the heat shield by itself can hold off the heat fairly well too, and the capsule itself is pretty temperature resistant too. So I think with the speed we're at, fingers crossed, we'll be okay. I should have put a little bit more ablator on there though. You can see the capsule starting to get heated. Oh, I hope they make it. Come on. Just a few more degrees down, or a few more velocity down, and we'll be okay. Yeah, okay, we're getting below 2,000 meters per second, and they're going to survive. That was a close run thing, yeah. You saw that temperature bar start to get up towards full. If that had gone all the way up, this capsule might have exploded. We might have had our first casualty of the program. I'd like to avoid that. Even if the Kerbals seem to have no fear of death. And you can see some city lights there off to the side. I think we're over the open ocean, though, because my sea level and my radar altimeter are not showing any difference. Still going too fast to hit the parachute. I could jettison the heat shield, but if I do that before releasing the parachute, it basically just gets stuck onto the thing by the air forces. Release the parachute, and I will skip ahead to the landing. I'll see you in a minute here. Alright, so here we are, splashed down safely on the ocean. I'll go ahead and run time forward so we can watch the sun come up over the capsule. There it is, the sky lightning. Bit of a glitch there where the water goes away when you try and look below it. But it's a beautiful sunny day. We're right by the shores of an island here. Let's see where we are. Okay, yeah, we get the shores biome. So why don't you get a quote-unquote surface sample from the shores here. Every little bit helps. We recover the vessel. Here are the crickets at the Space Center at night. And we've got 469 science. So first thing I'm going to do is get electrics here so I can have a solar panel and a slightly better space probe. That way we can start sending up automated missions. And then the rest of these, we've got to see what we've got. So here's some heavier rockets. Start getting larger SRBs, start getting the first 2-meter parts, or 2.5-meter parts. With that, we need these larger fuel tanks, of course. There's not much point in having those. And we'll also get these little miniature propulsion systems, too. That's good. And then we've got enough for one more of these. So here we've got some different kind of construction type parts. Better decouplers, tubes and things, hinges. You can actually build like walking mechs in this game if you know what you're doing. I may have to experiment with that. I've never really experimented with that before. Better landing gear, better flight controls, cargo units and things, basically for setting up your first rovers and for sort of experiment stations that you can set up. Once we get enough parts of those, we'll go ahead and set up an experiment station out on one of the poles of Kerbal. Just as a proof of concept, demonstrate how it all works. So, we're going to build a probe to land on the moon. Again, I will skip ahead of this part and come back to you once the construction is complete. And once the construction's complete, I'll show you what we've got, and we will do a night launch just for the drama of it. So I'll see you in a bit. Alright, so this is Luna 2, and it is much smaller than some of the crewed vehicles we've been launching. It only weighs 29.5 tons. Basically, it's got the lander stage here with the landing legs, the solar panels, one little engine at the bottom. It only needs to deal with the moon's gravity, so it doesn't need to be that strong. Your science package up here at the top, your antennae for communication, your battery packs for power storage. It doesn't have a science module just because we're trying to make it so small. It's all built on 0.625 meter parts. So that's why it doesn't have one of those. Then we've got the next stage, standard gimbaled basic engine here. One large of these tanks, one medium. And then we've got the lifting stage to get it off the ground here, which is using this new Bobcat engine we've unlocked, which has the 2 bells.
and 3 of the medium-sized kind of 1.875 meter tanks. So let's see how this does. All right, you can see we got a night launch. Space Center illuminated against the dark background. Engines to full. 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Honestly, this one is not as dramatic a night launch as some of them just because it's only got, this one engine on the bottom. We're not talking about lifting thousands of tons to orbit today. In the future, we will get there. Before too long, I want to turn over sideways here. Not sure why this tends to twist when I tell it to do that, but not a huge deal. Still pretty controllable. Up through the cloud layer. Trying to see if I can see the Space Center below. It looks like it must be kind of hidden away by the clouds. And staging. But of course we're getting out of the atmosphere, so now we can clearly see the Milky Way and everything. I'm going to skip ahead to where we reach orbit. You've seen these a million times before now. Alright, we've made it to orbit. I'm a little worried we're not going to have the Delta V to actually land properly at the moon, but let's give it a try anyway. Crashing a probe into the moon was something some of the early space programs did anyway, so we can just say we're repeating that little milestone. So yeah, what I want actually is a trajectory that will basically get us right on the moon, something like this, so that we can just decelerate straight out of this trajectory into a landing. And we can always adjust it a little bit later. So let's skip ahead to the burn. Watch the sunrise first. And here we are, doing the burn. Well, that's a good start. I just hope 647 meters per second is enough. I have a sneaking suspicion that it's not going to be enough. Now, the other thing we have to be careful here is we want to land on the day side of the moon so that we can actually use our solar panels. And we also need to make sure we're not letting the moon block our view of Kerbal, because right now we don't have any sort of relay network set up. If we went behind the moon, we'd lose control of our ship. I think you get a very limited probe control, but you can't do very much at all. Be difficult to do a landing with that. So let's decelerate here so that we can come in straight towards the moon. Reduce our periaps. Yeah, we'll come in straight towards them here. Sorry for that flickering. There we go. Then we'll try and achieve a landing once we get closer, although considering my current speed, I don't think it's going to be possible. I think what we'll be able to do is get the close-in science on the moon and then crash into it at high velocity. There it is. Let's at least, orient in the direction we'll be if we want to land, make a show of extending our landing gear. All that good stuff. Now, I think like the real moon, this one is tightly locked to Kerbal, so that's why it's not really rotating under us. You can see our surface and orbit velocities are basically the same. It's not moving very much, or not rotating very much. Yeah, we needed to have another significant element of delta V here if we wanted this to actually work. Set the engines to full and let's start trying to transmit down. Or we crash. The classic space probe thing. We're about to be destroyed. You're transmitting the last data you have. And kapow. Smashed into the lunar surface at high speed. So, we learned from that one we underbuilt that vessel. That's why we did this with a probe instead of with a crewed vessel first. Go back to the Space Center. We'll have gotten a little bit of science, probably not enough to buy any other nodes on the tech tree yet. We'll see. Yeah, not enough for that yet. So next week, I think we'll send a probe that actually works. Maybe to Minmus instead, just for variety. And then after that, we'll get working on a crewed landing and actually have a Kerbal walk on the surface of another world. So I am signing off for now. Thank you all very much for watching, and have a great day.